This is Emmett.
And Jessica.
And you're listening to the Friendly Atheist Podcast. Please go to patreon.com/Friendly Atheist Podcast to support this show and get your ad-free and exclusive episodes. And let me give a shout out to some of our more recent supporters. They include Sheila C., Joe G., Sarah F., Mark Z., and Jonas S. Thank you so much.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Mark Zuckerberg is apparently...
supports our show.
Yes, and I'm sorry
that
to
explains where he got the idea that we need to be more masculine because he's not finding it on this particular show.
All right, so we have much to talk about. I'm going to get right into this one because this happened late last week, but we never got a chance to talk about it.
Oh, boy.
Have you heard of measles?
Yeah, I have.
All right. I think the number in Texas, the measles outbreak that they're having in Texas, the last number I saw was well over 200 people infected with measles. I think 2 people have died already from measles. These are people who are unvaccinated. There's a Mennonite community in Texas that's anti-vax. And measles is very contagious. And that's why you want to get your kids vaccinated with the MMR vaccine. Mm-hmm. So the reason I bring that up is because, and this actually surprised me, about the MMR vaccine, like all vaccines, if 95% of the population is vaccinated, herd immunity kicks in. It's very hard for the virus to travel person to person. So that's why it's a public health issue. Everyone who can be vaccinated needs to be vaccinated. That was the story with the COVID vaccine. That's true of the measles vaccine. This is what surprised me in Texas. Private schools and public schools have to report vaccination rates to the state. I would have guessed private schools would not have had to do that in Texas.
I don't think private schools have to do anything in Texas.
Right. So the thing is, recently, a local news outlet in Texas pointed out, this is in North Texas, they pointed out there were 187 schools in North Texas where the kindergarten vaccination rates were lower than 95%. And that's not great, especially when you're dealing with a measles outbreak. And they pointed out that 6 schools in North Texas had vaccination rates lower than 50% for kindergartners.
That's not enough.
That's not even close to enough. And 5 of those, of course, were private Christian schools. One of them was just a charter school. And at the very bottom of their list, the very bottom, and I double-checked this with all of Texas, this is also the school at the bottom of the whole Texas list, is Mercy Culture Preparatory Academy, a private Christian school. Their vaccination rate for kindergartners, 14.3%. That is less than half of the second worst school in North Texas.
God.
So to be clear, anything below 95 is bad.
Not good.
This is 14.
Jesus.
Holy crap.
Oh, boy. Those poor children.
Those poor children. Those... I don't even know what to call the adults in their lives.
Yeah, I mean, truly.
Irresponsible, sure.
But so a lot of my, I don't know, rationalization or whatever recently has been kind of around like, well, this is what people wanted. This is what they voted for. This is what they wanted. And like, that carries you only so far when it starts killing children.
Yeah, and this is the problem with you voted for Trump, so you know what? If the economy gets destroyed, that's on you. The problem is when Trump does something stupid or when measles spreads, that affects all of us.
Right.
So it's not enough to just enjoy the Schadenfreude. It's nope, sorry, your stupid decision hurts everybody.
Right.
And that's why it's infuriating. I would be a much more horrible, less empathetic person if I was just like, well, at least the measles is just affecting these people. Though part of me definitely wants to feel that. Except that's not how the measles works. That's not how the economy getting destroyed works.
Right. That's how COVID worked.
Department of Education gets decimated, that hurts everybody.
Right.
Anyway, Mercy Culture Prep is a school, or MC Prep as they call it. It's a school with about 350 students.
My favorite DJ from the 80s.
I know. It's a school with about 350 students from preschool through 12th grade. Their website makes very clear this is all about the Bible. They say, we're a fully accredited school, K through 12. Our primary goal at MC Prep has always been to educate the whole child. We believe God is at the center of all subjects. Our teachers are highly qualified, degreed, and dedicated to train the next generation of young people that have a desire to make an impact in their communities through God's truth and love. And they are making an impact in the community, maybe,
They're
just not the way anyone wants, right? And this school very much wants these kids to be unvaccinated. It's not a coincidence that it's only a 14% vaccination rate. When I went on their website, they have a whole section for the forms that parents might need to fill out. It has stuff like if you have an extended absence, you're going on a trip for like 3 weeks, you got to fill out some paperwork because your kid's going to be out of school. I get that. They have like medication forms to allow school officials to give medicine to your kids. Makes sense. On that page is a vaccination affidavit application, and basically it's what you can send to the state that says, my kid's not vaccinated.
And suck it.
And suck it, yes. By the way, I looked at also, the school has a page for their stated values. Number 1 value, health. Not a joke. That's their number 1 value. Granted, they meant like fake Jesus health and not actual health.
We've gone through the looking glass, friends.
So there's no mention of how they plan to lead. They said, we want to prioritize daily personal encounters with God so we can lead others in health. I don't know how they plan to do that if they're in the hospital or 6 feet under.
One fun game that I'm going to keep playing in my head to amuse myself and keep myself from screaming into the void is everything they say, I'm going to pretend it's mostly just about masturbation. So go ahead.
Oh, there you go. We're talking about children.
Yeah.
All right.
That's why it's going to be funny.
All right. Sure.
Go ahead. Say the things you're going to say.
All right. So last week, the pastor of Mercy Culture Church, which is the church that oversees this school, his name is Landon Schott. He made a video, posted it on Instagram, and he's bragging about the vaccination rates because he saw that list on the local news about the worst vaccinated schools in the state. And he's like, you guys, guess what? Let me play you this clip, and then we're going to talk about this because this is, again, the leader of the church of the anti-vax school.
It's the leader of the church.
Hey guys, quick video. I just walked into an MC Prep board meeting and there was these balloons and a surprise gift. I'm like, what's this going out? And I just found out, I'm a little behind on the news. I'm a little slow, getting old. But I just found out we are the #1 school in Texas for least vaccinations. And I guess the news got a hold of it and they were trying to spin it like it was some awful thing. But I just want to congratulate all of the family members of MC Prep that embrace freedom of health, and they're not allowing government or science projects to affect how you live and lead your life. I know the entire world was shut down with insanity and people were fired from their job for forced vaccinations. And freedom is something that we take seriously. Religious freedom, freedom of our health. And so shout out to MC Prep for being the least vaccinated school in Texas. We'll take it, or as Mercy Culture say, we celebrate it. We'll put it on the board.
Yep. That's the guy running this place.
I'm sorry. The science project thing is one of the funniest things.
Vaccines are an adorable science project that you people do.
It's really fun to listen to, like, as a sort of language dork, I love to hear how the rhetoric around things shifts. Like, how can they downplay things? Like, how can they make, one of the probably the single greatest scientific achievement in human history, the vaccine, and make it sound like a volcano that a kid made with baking soda and vinegar.
Yep.
These people are so joyfully ignorant.
Joyfully ignorant is right, and he's playing this off as just religious freedom, freedom of our health. Their freedom is to literally put all of you in danger. And by the way, you don't see this in the audio clip. He held up a shirt in that video. They made shirts that say MC Prep, #1 school in Texas, and then in fine print at the bottom, for least amount of vaccinations.
These fucking people.
Like at that point, why are you handing out T-shirts? Just hand out the body bags.
They had a balloon drop for this.
Yeah. These people have memory hold everything that happened in 2020. They are brainwashed by this idea that closing public spaces to prevent the spread of COVID, which was a deadly airborne disease, was some kind of liberal conspiracy. Here's what I'm trying to figure out, and I don't have a good answer to this. I cannot tell if Landon Schott knows how vaccination works and understands herd immunity and just dismisses it and doesn't care, or if he just buys into the right-wing lie that rejecting vaccines is a point of pride because freedom. Like, either way, what
I
he's
think
actually...
number 2 is the clear answer
that
here.
That is just brainwashed. He doesn't actually know how any of this works.
No, I think these people are very reflexive in their worldview, certainly. Anything, like, truly, like, think of anything that like, they don't bring anything to the table. They just fight against the things the rest of us bring to the table.
If liberals like it, it must be bad.
Exactly. And that is a crazy way to live your, like, that's how teenagers are. Like when I was a kid and I was like, I don't like Titanic because everybody likes Titanic. And like, Titanic's a good movie. I should have liked it. Like, it's not okay to not like something because...
just because everyone else.
Right. That's very stupid and juvenile.
What he is celebrating is that his school puts more kids at risk of dying of a preventable disease because the parents who send their kids there are clueless and are surrounded and led by even more irresponsible adults. These people are so pro-life, they are willing to sacrifice their kids and yours to own the libs. And it's not just this church either. State representative in Texas, Nate Schatzline, who is a Republican, who represents this district and apparently sends his kids to this school.
Well, sure, it's the number 1 school in Texas, I heard.
According to a shirt.
I didn't read the fine print, though, so don't ask me about it.
He said on X/Twitter, I've gotten word that my children's school has been ranked the number 1 most unvaccinated school in Texas, and I am upset... ... that we haven't celebrated sooner. Way to go, MC Prep. You've earned a Medical Freedom Award from my office.
A Medical Freedom Award
By the
from
way,
the principal's office? What are you saying?
Since we're talking about the rhetoric here, this idea that they got ranked number 1. No, you just failed a test the most. They did not sit there like the NCAA tournament brackets and say which school is like the best and it's subjective. It's you failed the worst and they put you at the bottom and you're like, we're ranked and they chose us.
No, no. What, guys?
Just a huge parade of religious morons who are so selfish that they are unwilling to protect their own communities because it would mean acknowledging that scientists got this one right. By the way, in the video that representative made, he also criticized one of the transgender scientists who worked at the Department of Health and Human Services under Joe Biden.
Oh, does he know a lot of scientists? Does he know a lot of famous CDC scientists? Or is he just so ragingly transphobic that that's all he can find?
They're all ragingly transphobic.
I mean, when you're... Oh, boy.
This guy also told a local newspaper... this is the pastor. The pastor posted on social media, don't let spiritually unhealthy people tell you how to be healthy.
What does it mean? What does it mean?
Apparently, if you don't love Jesus like he does, you don't get to tell him about how medicine works. Which is weird because there is a Christian rationalization you could use. You could say God gave us vaccines. God gave us the knowledge to develop vaccines. Mm-hmm. God gave us the skills to learn how to turn nature into vaccines. They could make that argument. It would be stupid. We could make fun of that for different reasons.
Yeah.
But they could do it. They are choosing not to because they're just red-pilled and brainwashed. Just the dumbest people. These people also celebrate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, quote, is showing us the truth about many vaccines. That's also the pastor.
They give you brainworms.
So they're celebrating all this right now because as far as we know, measles has not affected the kids in that school yet. Mm-hmm. But if and when that happens, oh my God, everyone in that building is going to be at risk. The virus will spread very fast. That's going to affect not just the school, the people, the families attached to the school, but everyone who lives in their community. But these Christians just don't care because they think their faith is going to protect them from diseases, and they're too arrogant to listen to experts who have studied viruses their whole lives. One commenter on Shot's video on Instagram pointed out, it's easy to see why this guy is excited. Funerals for children are very lucrative for pastors.
Jesus fucking Christ.
By the way, when I was researching this story, one story came up a couple years ago about this church, Mercy Culture Church, that mentioned the pastor and everything. And it was about how survivors of sex trafficking say this church exploited them for cash. Just to point out,
wait,
they're bad for a whole bunch of other reasons.
Did I black out for 5 minutes?
You
what
did,
the
but that was
fuck are
separate.
you saying?
I think this church was like, we here oppose sex trafficking, and we have sex trafficked victims, survivors here.
And for a low price of $99 a month,
so
you too
make sure
can...
to tithe and support our work.
Yeah, these people are bad.
They are.
I don't think they have good values or priorities, and I think they are going to lead to the downfall of this country.
Literally, because we're all going to fall down because we're all going to get measles.
Hot take.
All right, different story here. There was a profile in the New York Times this week by Ruth Graham, who's a religion reporter for them, about a guy named Aaron Renn, R-E-N-N. I was not familiar with this guy beforehand, but he's apparently a well-known figure in like evangelical Christian circles. He's not a pastor, he's not a professor, which makes it unusual that this guy has become well-known for like an article he wrote a couple of years ago and has traveled in circles and has become like common rhetoric for people who follow church culture. And let me give you some background before I talk about what he actually wrote. I'll ask you, is it hard to be a Christian these days in America?
No.
That's the right answer. There's no debate. You know that, I know that. There isn't a single group, religious group, non-religious group, that has more cultural power because everyone knows about your culture. That's what I mean by that. More political power, more raw numbers, though that's changing, more infrastructure spread out across the country, more shout-outs at award ceremonies and
is that part of your
post-game
study?
press conferences. Yeah. I mean, and if you ask Christians who think, oh, we have no power, everyone makes fun of us. Okay, which religious group do you want to trade places with?
That's not having power. That's exactly what having power is. If you are the most powerful thing, you are therefore the target.
Right.
That's
and if
just
you,
how
and if you want to
humor
play
do.
victim, it's like, okay, who do you think has it better than you do? They don't have an answer because they would never voluntarily give up what they currently have because they have it too good.
Yeah.
That's how good it is to be a Christian. But like you said, when you're in power and when you've been in power forever, like conservative Christians, yes, you're going to be criticized. And in this case, there's no shortage of reasons people should be mad at you. I mean, what do you want to talk about? Sexual abuse, the propping up of right-wing fascists, the vaccine denial we just talked about, the destruction of public schools so you could steal that money for your private indoctrination camps. We're now losing our democracy. They're rolling back civil rights protections from minority groups. They're allowing the richest Americans to loot our country, all while white evangelical leaders continue to give Trump adoration and serve as a shield. Like, hey, stop attacking him. He's a Christian. He brings us to the table so you don't get to attack him in church or whatever. There's a lot of reasons to blame conservative Christians for what's wrong with our country, right? So in 2022, this guy I'm talking about, Aaron Renn, he published an article that basically went viral in the evangelical world. It's published in a journal called First Things, which is like an evangelical scholarly journal of sorts. And what he said is that basically Christians are now victims. And this is the way he kind of put it. He said before 1994, not because anything special happened in 94, but he needed a starting point.
Okay.
Before 1994, being a Christian, he argued, is widely seen as a good thing. If you tell someone you're a Christian, oh, you're probably a good person. You're probably an upstanding citizen. It's a status enhancer. He said being a Christian back in the day was a good thing because no one questioned that you were a good person. And he called that the positive world.
Is this going to be 500 words?
Oh, it's longer than that.
Is this going to be 10,000 words about actions have consequences? Christians are being shitty, and now people think all Christians are shitty. Like, is that the thesis of this?
Second half is right. People think all Christians are shitty is where he's going with it. But he said before 1994, being a Christian was a good thing. It was a positive thing. He calls that the positive world. In the 2 decades after that, he said being Christian was neutral. Like, maybe it was good, maybe it was bad. I'm simplifying his argument here. And then he argued that since 2014, and this is the important part, Christians have lived in a negative world. Remember that phrase, that's what he's associated with. Have lived in a negative world where people see Christianity as a bad thing, quote, particularly in the elite domains of society. 2014, by the way, he said it's right before the Obergefell ruling in 2015, and that was kind of the height of Christian equals bad, right?
Oh, but that wasn't the height. We're still swimming through those heights.
Mm-hmm. But in practice, what he's saying is prominent evangelicals who may have had influence in the culture, like a Billy Graham back in the day, those people are now deemed bigots. They are canceled, according to him. It's hard out there for Christians to affect the culture, and the culture has begun to influence the way the gospel is taught when in his mind it should be the other way around. Here's what he wrote. Society has come to have a negative view of Christianity. Being known as a Christian is a social negative, particularly in the elite domains of society. Christian morality is expressly repudiated and seen as a threat to the public good and the new public moral order. Subscribing to Christian moral views or violating the secular moral order brings negative consequences. That's what he wrote. He basically defined this reality and argued, hey, Christians can still come away on top. He wrote, having adapted so many times before, evangelicals can do it yet again to thrive in the negative world.
What are you talking about?
We'll get there. So he was just profiled in the New York Times, and basically they were saying this dude, who kind of comes out of nowhere, relatively speaking, has had quite an impact because a lot of Christian leaders, pastors, church leaders have now used that negative world framework to describe what their people are up against. Here's how the New York Times put it. But negative world is now the dominant framework for many people trying to understand their place in contemporary America.
Does he capitalize negative world, NW?
He did, just for the sake of this is a phrase I'm doing.
Okay.
The New York Times says, the idea has inspired conferences, sermons, and countless response essays and blog posts. A reviewer in Christianity Today called it, quote, among the most thought-provoking ideas pertaining to American evangelicalism this century. Negative World has turned Mr. Renn into a kind of Malcolm Gladwell of conservative Christianity, a skilled taxonomist known for distilling and naming a phenomenon that many were feeling, but none had articulated. And I'm not even criticizing the New York Times reporter for this, just describing what people in that world believe. Mm-hmm. But she says Renn was influenced by the right-wing manosphere. Surprise, surprise.
I'm sorry. Manosphere is a thing we're going to say now?
Oh, that's been a thing for a long time.
Manosphere?
Oh, yeah. All the Rogan, all the women are ruining our lives.
That's what they call that?
Yes.
I hate it.
This dude thinks they are far more effective and correct on a whole number of issues than a lot of preachers. And his solution to help evangelicals make their way through the negative world is effectively, don't try to be like them. Let's make our own little enclaves. Here's what the New York Times writes about that. On the Christian right, then, a thesis is emerging. If conservative Christians are no longer a moral majority, but a moral minority, they must shift tactics. They ought to be less concerned with persuading the rest of the country they are relevant and can fit perfectly well in secular spaces. They don't. Instead, they must consider abandoning mainstream institutions like public schools and build their own alternatives.
Now we're talking.
They must pursue ownership of businesses and real estate, and they must stop triangulating away from difficult teachings on matters like sexuality and gender differences. Resilience over relevance.
Ooh, good presidential thumb you're using.
I know, thank you. So basically, the argument that Renn is making, and other people like Rod Dreher, who's popular in conservative evangelical circles, have also argued this. Stop trying to join them. Stop trying to influence them. Society is bad. Just form your own bubbles of conservative Christianity where we can say women are subservient to men, where we could say, hey, private Christian schools all the way. Don't send your kids to a demonic public school. Like, form your own little bubbles. And I know we would be fine with all of that.
I love this idea. I think we should get it up on its feet.
What they won't do, though, they won't do that, though, because, again, when it comes to politics, for example, do you think they're going to just say, well, we own Utah, so we're good? No, they're going to be like, well, we still have to own the presidency, so, like, we got to control everyone else. They're not going to let go of that. But the thing is, doing those things, creating these bubbles, that would only make conservative Christians even more disliked, since they're never just creating their own safe spaces. They're destroying the spaces the rest of us live in order to create their new bubbles. They are trying to take over communities, not become a part of them. They are taking money from public education to make their private religious schools bigger. They are trying to take over public school boards and government positions so that they can shove Christianity into the curriculum because there are no academic or ethical reasons to do it. They're taking kids, we've talked about LifeWise, taking kids out of public school so they can be indoctrinated during the school day. And Renn also pointed out that Trump's election was only possible in a negative world because Christian values that we support are no longer taken seriously. We all support like marital fidelity and honesty and all that. But you don't. I know. And the thing is, what he doesn't recognize...
What is he talking about?
He's making shit up. Trump only got elected because conservative Christians didn't give a shit about their supposed values.
Yeah.
They voted for him and pushed him over the finish line. If they cared about helping the least of these and family values, they would not have supported a thrice married convicted felon who brags about sexually assaulting women.
Yeah.
So this dude doesn't get into any of that.
Yeah, well, I guess it's so deeply dishonest to be, because also he's not digging into like why these things are true.
Why people don't like them.
Why people don't like them. Why they have bad reputations. And you can't...
He thinks it's because society has gotten worse, not because they've become more objectionable. And the thing is, if people see Christianity as a negative thing these days, it's because it's deserved. It's not because we just hate God. It's because we're constantly surrounded by evidence of how powerful Christians use their faith to hurt others. I don't hear a lot of atheists complaining necessarily about Jesus or like faith-based food pantries. They're mad about misogyny and homophobia and hypocrisy and incompetence and ignorance. The people who started the culture wars and made it a whole political thing keep acting like they were just minding their own business.
Right.
But then these, I don't know, gay people showed up. Like, they're the ones launching grenades everywhere. Then they're getting mad when people, like, throw them back. They're mad because their shitty beliefs lead to them not getting invited to Thanksgiving dinner, getting protested when they give lectures, getting criticized by, like, celebrities and athletes with larger platforms, and being the people the rest of us talk about when they leave the room. And they're so mad that they don't get respect when they're like, but you guys, I'm Christian. Back in the day, in like the 50s, when there were no Muslims or Hindus or public atheists around, everyone liked us. And how
everyone was white. It was great. Oh my God, I loved that. And everyone wore suits. Everyone wore suits and hats and were white.
Yeah. One of the New York Times pointed out that this guy, one of his supporters, who is a Muslim who has drifted away from the left, one of those like, I'm not voting for Kamala Harris because of Gaza, and then like, okay, fine, I'm sure Trump is better for you.
So good on Gaza.
One of those morons. He points out like, well, I like this guy, Renn, but also he's kind of missing something. Here's what this Muslim guy said. But as a member of I'm sorry, this is the New York Times.
Yeah.
But as a member of a religious minority for whom the United States has never been positive world, this Muslim said he did not see neutral or negative world occupancy as catastrophic. Quote, just because wider society isn't embracing me or rejoicing over me doesn't mean I get to lash out in response, he said. The culture may be opposed to you, but that doesn't mean you're not legally and politically secure.
Wow, that's a really good point.
Right. This guy likes this guy, by the way. He's on his side. He's like, but my friend, you're missing kind of a big thing.
Yeah, well, and it's also, again, really disingenuous to talk about how, quote unquote, the culture feels about Christians when if you look at the makeup of Congress, of the Senate, of the last every president
Again, which
ever.
group do you want to trade places with that you think has it much better than you?
The thing is, I don't think that it's that he wants to trade places. It's that it's been taken.
The respect has been taken away.
Exactly. He had a shortcut. All Christians had this shortcut in life of like, I wear this little gold cross and everybody knows it means I
am awesome.
I'm a capital G good guy.
Right.
And now that's not a thing anymore. It's truly
'Cause
like
we
they
know
got
better.
It's like they got the bumpers taken off the lanes at bowling, right? And they're like, but the ball can go in the gutter now. That's terrible. I don't want it to go in the gutter. And it's like, yeah, dog, none of us wants it to go
Then
in the
learn
gutter.
to bowl.
Yeah. You just have to be responsible for where your ball goes. And sometimes listen, sometimes we all bowl I lost a metaphor.
That's all right. One of the other things that was funny in the article, and the New York Times didn't make a big deal about this, but they should have, is that the reporter went to Renn's home to spend time with him, and they were in Carmel, Indiana. Do you know anything about Carmel, Indiana? It's a suburb of Indianapolis.
Do you know what's so funny is I just went to a personal trainer, a physical therapist, the doctor, and he's
Personal trainer.
Shut up.
Same thing.
Physical therapist is PT and personal
Yes.
trainer is PT, and it's hard in my stupid brain.
Yes.
First of all PTs are so fucking handsome. It's disgusting and unnecessary. I don't need that from you guys. But anyway, the point is he mentioned that he was from Indiana, and I was like, and I asked whereabouts because I went to school in Muncie, and he says Carmel. I was like, oh yeah, you do definitely have that vibe.
What's the vibe?
Oh, beautifully white teeth, very thick, just snobby Midwestern boys. Like think of like the sort of like South Carolina sort of contingency of those boys who like go to college and run amok. It's that, but
Yes, the White Lotus crowd. Got it.
Honestly, yeah, it's the rich people of Indianapolis.
And this is the thing that the article did not really spend any time discussing because it was outside the scope of the piece. But also, Carmel, Indiana is a very wealthy suburb of Indianapolis.
Wealthy. Also, guys, don't insult your doctor to his face. He was very nice about it.
This is what the New York Times said. And they're quoting Renn, who's like, let me take you around my city because let me show you what it's like when we do things the way I want to do them. Right? This is what the Times said.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
Carmel is thriving, in Mr. Renn's view, because its Republican leaders have focused on things like public safety, low taxes, and excellent infrastructure and amenities, while avoiding the distractions of what he called extreme ideologies like DEI hiring practices or banning gasoline-powered lawn equipment. A few things about this. Let's set aside the idea that working to hire minorities who have been excluded from those opportunities in the past is, quote, extreme.
Wait.
And just note, when you live in a red state where Republicans can write laws at the state level, that makes it a lot easier for local governments that agree with you to focus on everything else. So his idea that they don't talk about these issues, yeah, it's because the Republicans at the state level do the dirty work for them.
Also,
That's one thing.
As somebody who spent a lot of time with a lot of people from Carmel and Fishers and all that little area, the bubble is real. Like, because you have to understand Indianapolis is like, what's the next closest city besides Chicago is Cincinnati, I think.
Okay.
Like, there's not a lot of other metro areas in the immediate area. And so...
So you're far away from real big cities where you might have other issues you got to deal with.
Exactly.
Sure. And one of the other things, like, Carmel is overwhelmingly white.
Oh.
Fewer than 4%, I checked, is black. Fewer than 4%. So he's like, one of the things he said in the article is that we have in Carmel, quote, diversity that works. That was his quote.
I'm sorry, what could that possibly mean?
I don't know what it could mean, but I'm just saying fewer than 4% of the people are black. And
are black or not white? I don't know if that's
black.
Okay.
There's, I think, a larger percentage of Asians there as well.
Oh, they'll accept Asians.
Right. Like, if you want to play that game.
Hemmett, you're confused. Asians aren't the bad minorities. Those are the good minorities.
Oh, I see. The model minorities. Yes.
It is the Asian. So you and your cohorts.
The average family in Carmel makes $117,000 a year, which is like 3 times the national average. Again, wealthy suburb. And listen, we live in wealthy suburbs. I understand it. I'm not even knocking them for living that way. No. But to pretend that we're doing it right here while ignoring the societal realities of like where you live, the privileges that come with that.
It's truly like
this guy lives in a bubble and doesn't realize it, which is kind of the whole point of his whole little theory.
Just
here.
Thinking about the local area where we live, like Hinsdale was kind of the really nice area where I grew up, and just there's no way you can access it without basically being fucking born into like the 8 square block area around Hinsdale.
Because it would cost a lot of money otherwise.
Because it costs so much money. Yeah. And like there's just this very like cliquey rich people bullshit thing. But they all think, oh, I'm in a suburb and I take the train to the city. I'm one of the regular people. And it's just not it.
I mean, I drive there in my limo to the train station.
Obviously.
I mean, look, this guy's entire professional career appears to be all about ignoring his own privilege. So no wonder he's considered an intellectual among right-wing evangelicals. Mm-hmm. It's not like they have a lot of options. I just found that story interesting
really
because
wild. And I'm sorry, a New York Times reporter went with him to Carmel, Indiana, to be like, look at the majesty of Carmel, Indiana,
to document why is this guy so popular? Not just popular. I mean, again, there have been conferences and sermons, many of them preached about what this guy has been saying, and outside their circles, odds are, and this is true for me, I don't know how many people know about this guy outside those Christian conservative circles. And that's a fair thing.
I've never heard of him, and I feel like I would have.
That's what that dude's all about.
Boy, I just want to swim in these waters a little while longer. I love the idea of Christians feeling like they are like not the cool kids anymore. Like truly, they're the hall monitors now, and they hate it. And like
they feel like they are owed respect, but they won't do anything to deserve it.
It's like
earn it.
Terrible stepfather, right? Like you shall respect me. Like I mean, I don't have to necessarily.
I mean, that's what Elon Musk is doing too. Like, I'm rich, you should think I'm amazing. And really, every time he steps on stage in a public venue, he gets booed. When Saturday Night Live makes fun of him, he's deeply offended because he thinks he is owed respect. Trump is the same way. Republicans as a whole are the same way. They think they are just earned respect. And then when they show up outside their bubbles, they do interviews not on Fox News or like a Sunday morning talk show.
The bumpers get taken off.
Everyone just asks them simple, basic questions they can't answer.
Right.
It's like they don't understand why everyone's mocking them and disliking them.
I learned recently that there are 2 kinds of psychopath. Well, obviously it's not that basic, but there's, not psychopath, but narcissist. There's secure and insecure. So a secure narcissist genuinely thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, absolutely believes everything he thinks 100%. Like if he gets called on his bullshit, he has no problem just like manipulating the situation to get him what he wants. An insecure narcissist is like the Trump of it all, of like the smallest amount of criticism and he just spirals out of control because he is so deeply narcissistic, but is not able to spin that in any like useful way, and he cannot stand criticism, and so he just completely loses his cool. Elon Musk is the same way. Like he so desperately needs outside validation.
One of the things Renn said is like, all we are doing is upholding like traditional sexual ethics and values. And it's like, okay, tell us more about, one of the things that was in this article that made that made me laugh, but a lot of the commenters on the New York Times website also laughed at it. I'm trying to find it here. Let me find it. You talk for a second.
That's fine. No, I think that the whole idea of I'm Christian, they could hide behind it like a shield, right? And that's always been true, and that's always been a metaphor for everything. But golly, I love this idea that like, oh, Carmel, we're not doing anything special here. We just have some of the richest Indianans in the state in our little county, and we take care of the roads and have nice facilities. Not that hard to do, except for you're probably not dealing with a lot of contingencies that need a lot of your support services. So it's easier to make a pretty little park, which I'm not anti-parks. I like parks. Parks are good and important. But this idea of like, oh, we don't have crime because the hoi polloi doesn't come in here. It's a very us versus them way to think. And I think it does make some sense in terms of the black and white thinking. And like with Trump and things like that.
I lied about the thing I was looking for, by the way.
You didn't find it?
It's in a different story.
God damn it. Can you give me the gist of it?
No.
Oh, boy. Then plane landed.
Anyway.
We're such good professional radio people. This
I thought
is just
I had
like
something.
what Wait, Don't Tell Me is.
It's okay. I'm going to jump to a different story because we can talk about this Renn guy for a while. Let's talk about your favorite state. There you go. In Oklahoma Republicans did something kind of good recently. Kind of good. You remember Ryan Walters wants to get Bibles in every public school classroom.
Down the plate.
I don't need a soundtrack for this.
Okay. I'm done.
Ryan Walters wants to get Bibles in every public school classroom, even though school officials don't want that. Church-state separation advocates don't want that. Even MAGA Republicans are like, what the hell are you doing? And he has a new grift now.
Oh,
and I'll tell you about that.
I've been worried about him. He's aimless.
One of the things he announced back in October is that he wanted to spend $6 million to get King James Version Bibles all in every classroom in the state. He said his office already budgeted $3 million, and he's going to ask the legislature to give him $3 million more to buy the Bibles.
The Bibles that nobody wants or asked for.
Right. Mind you, Oklahoma has only about 43,000 public school teachers. Most of them don't teach classes that would even need a Bible under his own plans. And even if you bought a copy for every single one of them, it would be almost $140 a book.
So PPB is $140.
Yeah.
Which, inflation's happening. Books are expensive. I do not think, though, that any Bible with Trump's stupid fucking name on it.
Well, that was later.
Oh,
at first he
just
said we need Bibles for every classroom, and it's like, no, you don't. And why are you spending that much money on these Bibles?
Yeah.
Then later he said, by the way, it has to be the KJV Bible, which is not copyrighted. It has to include the pledge and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Oh, and it has to be bound in leather or leather-like material. And that's when we realized, wait, it sounds like the only Bible that fits the description is the Trump Bibles that he's been hawking. And that's when people started talking about that.
The Bibles that you get in hotel rooms, they don't even have hard covers. You can
and they don't have the Bill of Rights, so you can't use those Gideon's Bibles that are free.
But my point is more, the hardcover thing is not a necessary thing, especially when you're like, hey, kids, you're going to carry this around with you all day, I guess. Let's make it as heavy and cumbersome as we can.
The Bible's on the internet now. So you don't need, you kids have their phones.
I think that's where God lives.
But anyway, the reason I bring all this up is what happened recently is that where we're at with this, like, remember, he put out a call. I need publishers to sign up offering to send me all these books, these Bibles that I want.
And that guy put it together.
And no one could provide it because no one could make it that fast and no one had those Bibles available except the Trump Bible sitting in a warehouse somewhere. But recently, the Senate Education Appropriations Subcommittee, they were considering their budget for the Department of Education, and the budget that they proposed did not have the $3 million that Ryan Walters had requested.
Uh-oh.
I watched the meeting.
What happened, Ryan?
I watched the meeting about this. They didn't even bring it up.
Was he there?
Nope. And if they did, if someone asked about it, I think I read one article that said they only spent like 15 seconds on it, but I looked for those 15 seconds and I couldn't even find it. But I think someone's like, are we doing that? They're like, no. And then they just moved on to other stuff they were discussing. They didn't even
Not
really
with a bang,
talk
but with a
about
whimper.
it. Yeah. And one of the things a Democrat pointed out there's not enough money to set aside for the $3 million, especially if it's going to end up in a big lawsuit or perpetuate a lawsuit. And a Democrat senator said, it's really sincerely not a priority of Oklahomans. And the lawmaker, the Democrat, said that's why Senate Education Subcommittee members decided to prioritize other things in their proposed budget, like teaching kids math and making sure maternity pay is covered, which is fine, all good. But she's like, yeah, that's why the committee I'm a part of, which, by the way, run by Republicans, did not focus on these extraneous other things that some Republicans want.
So did he get the original $3 million? He did not get the additional $3 million?
He said, I'm going to take $3 million from the budget I already have and use it for these Bibles. But legally speaking, he hasn't been able to spend it. But he needed more, and they're not giving it to him.
So now he's stuck with the $3 million he started with,
but he can't use it yet because legally speaking, he's been blocked from using
he has no political support anymore.
Right. And that's why this week...
In Oklahoma.
That's why this week, Ryan Walters announced, I'm partnering with Lee Greenwood, the God bless the USA guy,
and I'm proud,
to get these Bibles in the classrooms anyway. And he urged people, both of the guys, urged people to donate money. Because here's the thing, the Trump Bibles that he was hawking, those were actually Lee Greenwood's grift. Years ago, Greenwood said, hey, buy my Bibles. They're God bless the USA Bibles that not only come with the text, the KJV text of the Bible, but come with the Bill of Rights and the Constitution in very small print. No one's going to care. Blah, blah, blah. And by the way, I'm also going to throw in there the lyrics to the one song I made.
Proud to be.
So he said, I'm going to sell those Bibles, and it sold for, I'm making this up, it's in the ballpark, sold for like $40. And no one bought any of them. And then Trump comes along and says,
wait a second,
I'll put my name on it, but I get a cut of the proceeds. And Greenwood's like, fine, I have a warehouse full of these books. Let's stamp your name on it, call it the Trump Bible. And then Trump started hawking the Lee Greenwood Bibles, but this time it cost like $60.
Grifts all the way down.
And he got a portion of that. So Walters is now saying, well, I'm going to work with Lee Greenwood to sell the God Bless the USA Bibles, like version 1.0, not the Trump ones. And I need you to give me $60 a pop so I can buy these books so that we could donate them to teachers across the state.
Honestly, that's not a terrible plan if it weren't pairing with a grifter who probably...
You're going to need to be more specific about which grifter
Lee
you
Greenwood,
were talking
who
about.
Probably cannot afford to just donate all of these books. Otherwise, I do not think he'd be hawking them so hard if he was financially secure.
Yeah.
So he wants Lee Greenwood, who is trying to sell these things for profit, and Trump selling for profit. Actually, forget that. Fuck that shit. No money for you. Gimme. And then we're just going to give them out and you get nothing.
You get nothing. His announcement, Ryan Walters' announcement about all this, falsely said the Oklahoma legislature stripped all funding away from getting Bibles back into the classroom. They did not. They never agreed to it in the first place. It's not theft when you never owned it to begin with. You know what I mean? No one ever owned it. Then he urged people to visit BiblesForOklahoma.com so they could make donations. That just redirects to Lee Greenwood's website.
Proud to be
an
American.
Anyone can make a purchase. It's, you know those commercials where they're like, do you want to symbolically adopt an endangered elephant in another country?
Yeah.
You don't get anything in return.
You get a picture.
But you get the symbolic victory there, yeah. So Walters insists in his announcement, he's not promoting religion, you guys.
No.
He's just endorsing, quote, the historical and secular significance of the Bible in all areas of education. It's not historical. It's not secular. None of this fixes anything.
These people are stupid.
And the thing is, even if his office raised, let's say, $3 million to buy all those Bibles, getting them into classrooms would still be illegal for all the reasons we've discussed. Like the lawsuits are not going away. School districts are not on board. Lee Greenwood, by the way, has not said a lot about this initiative himself outside of retweets promoting the same thing. My favorite version of this is that he tweeted one of the things that said the Bible is the most influential document. Ryan Walters has committed to get every kid in Oklahoma a Bible. That's not even true. It's for one per teacher.
Yeah.
But we need your help. Go to BiblesForOklahoma.com and join the fight. Right under that, like the tweet he posted right before that, I'm proud to partner with Global Coin to bring you an exclusive collection of collectible coins that honor our nation's history and values. Each coin is a limited edition treasure crafted with stunning detail and backed by authenticity.
He stuck the landing. He did it, ladies and gentlemen.
God
bless the USA.
Thank you. He was grifting a collectible coin and then, like, minutes later, hawked his collectible Bibles. Like,
oh, God. It's just Ponzi schemes over and over and over again.
And the thing is, like, maybe the bigger story here is that even Republicans in Oklahoma are like, we're not putting up with this dude's bullshit.
Yeah, that's
Ignoring
a good point.
him. I mean, they're doing plenty of damage on their own, but even they're like, yeah, but we're not doing this one. It's not helping us. You don't have to hand it to them under any circumstances. But on this issue, even they're kind of tired of Ryan Walter's need for attention and admiration from the conservative Christian base. And Oklahoma, of course, ranks 49th in the nation for education. And even these Republicans are like, no, we're not trying to be 50, 51,
but we are going to have a thing where, like, we just found out that Oklahoma is the worst state.
Yes.
Yay!
Unless you're in Texas and you're that anti-vax school.
Exactly. Was it Ryan Walters who said the thing about the 10 Commandments in the classrooms because a kid could be arrested for murder?
No, that was Tim Barton. I think.
Tried to explain that to my husband, Mikey, and we almost got in a fight about it because he just did not understand what I was saying. So what it was this guy was like, oh, we need to have the 10 Commandments because if a kid murders somebody, we would arrest him for that, and do not kill is right there on the 10 Commandments. And that's basically what I said to Mikey. And he was like, but that doesn't make sense. I was like, no, I understand it doesn't make sense, but that's what he's saying. And he just could not wrap his brain around what I was saying, and we genuinely almost got in a fight.
He's trying to logic his way out of a dumb
thing. He hasn't like, you have to sort of sometimes let your brain go smooth and just let it slide over it.
I'm going to jump to a different story here because this dude... there's another right-wing Christian who said something ridiculous. There's a guy named Mark David Hall.
David Chapman?
There you go. He's a professor at Pat Robertson's Regent University. And he's basically a guy who says, listen, I'm an academic, and I'm here to tell you Christian nationalism is not a real thing. That's his whole shtick.
That's a cool life.
I mean, again, Pat Robertson's dude.
Yeah.
All right. So... this guy was on a podcast recently. Pat Robertson. Yep, he's looking up at us.
Cool.
So this dude went on a podcast and he basically implied that Christian nationalism is just like a liberal conspiracy pulled up out of thin air. Let me play you a clip of what this guy said during his interview, then we'll talk about it.
Well, I'll jump in if I may. So I think it's important to recognize that literally no one in America is using the phrase Christian nationalism until about 2006. When a steady stream of books started coming out by Michelle Goldberg, Catherine Stewart, Andrew Seidel, and others, and they were describing a complete toxic mix, a mess. It's Christians who want to take over America for Christ and favor white Christians above all others. So we want to bring back Jim Crow. We want to have religious illiberalism. We want women to be in the house and barefoot, and that's what book after book says. And these are mostly, I call them the polemical critics, often journalists or activists. But when we get academics involved, someone like a Whitehead and Perry defined Christian nationalism as an ideology that idolizes and advocates a fusion of American civic life with a particular type of Christianity culture that includes assumptions of nativism, white supremacy, patriarchy, heteronormativity, divine sanction for authoritarian control, and militarism, and on they go.
So what that guy is saying
He's just really doing a great job of explaining white nationalism. Honestly, I haven't heard somebody be so succinct.
He's basically saying all these academics and writers, including Andrew Seidel, Catherine Stewart, Michelle Goldberg, they were describing Christians as these people who wanted to take over America for Christ. They favored white Christians above everyone else, acted like we want to bring back Jim Crow and forget religious plurality, and we want women in the house and barefoot. Like, you guys, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And then he says you have academics who have studied this stuff, not writers or anyone whose commentary who offer commentary on this, but you have academics like Andrew Whitehead and Samuel Perry, who, when they define Christian nationalism, it's not just we believe we were founded as a Christian nation and we think America would be better off with Christian ideals. Those academics say, what is Christian nationalism? It includes nativism, white supremacy, America is like our country, patriarchy, anti-LGBTQ, militaristic. Those are all baked into their definition of Christian nationalism. And he's like, and that's totally unfair.
Because what Christian nationalism really is
all of that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Like in this dude's view, Christian nationalism boils down to, do you think America was founded as a Christian nation? And do you think we'd be better off if we followed Christian values? And see, those are harmless things, you guys.
Yeah.
So when you say it's a white supremacist thing, he's like, no, now you're being mean. Stop it. And what this dude is saying, like, he's arguing no one used the phrase before 2006. Two problems with that. One is, okay, the terminology may have changed in some ways, but like George Bush saying, I'm not going to do stem cell research in 2001 because some Christians believe it's abortion. That's what we're talking about. When you do your war on terror, which is infused with religious rhetoric, which he did, that's Christian nationalism. It's those beliefs that got Reagan elected twice. You can call it the moral majority, the religious right. There's some distinctions.
Morning in America.
Yeah, like conservative Christians have long pushed for a country in which their beliefs, not facts, not what's good for minorities, their beliefs shape public policy, and Christian nationalism just clarifies what they've believed for a long time. But it's not even a new term. This is the second thing. Our friend Warren Throckmorton even pointed out on his website that the literal phrase Christian nationalism was used decades before 2006. And guess what? It described a movement of Christianity that was racist and sexist and militaristic. So it's not a new phrase.
No.
You just didn't notice it.
And also, just because it's new does not mean it's not valid. That's also like, for an academic to say that is really dishonest.
Yeah.
Of like, whether or not it was, just because it didn't have a name before doesn't mean what a
Ask
fucking
the negative
idiot.
world guy.
And
just because something didn't have a name doesn't necessarily mean it's irrelevant.
And this guy thinks he's an academic?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's at Pat Robertson's university.
Got
doesn't
you.
count.
Got
so
you.
if you think about what Christians want today, conservative, white evangelical Christians, they very much want a nation in which men are providers and women are caretakers, where like the only thing women are good for is baby making, where minority groups are marginalized.
I'm not good for that. Sorry.
That's why the Christians don't like you.
Yeah.
Minority groups are marginalized for the benefit of white people, where non-Christians and even non-conservative Christians are treated as second-class citizens. And then elsewhere in the episode, this guy said, listen, I'm not a fan of Christian nationalism.
Wait, I thought it doesn't exist.
But I'm just saying, even if it was a thing and it got implemented, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. It's like Susan Collins saying, I'm very concerned about what Donald Trump is doing.
Do not speak that woman's name in this house.
And this is the thing I thought Renn said in the previous story. No, it's this guy. This guy said, if we adopted Christian nationalism as an actual thing, I don't think it's a thing. I'm just saying, if it was a thing and we adopted it, all it would do, and you're going to love this, all it would do is take us back to the 1950s, quote, minus the racism and minus the sexism. That is a direct quote. Christian nationalism would just take us back to the 50s without the racism and sexism, which is wildly delusional since racism and sexism are kind of baked into conservative Christianity, and weirdly nostalgic because the 1950s sucked for a lot of people who don't fit this guy's race or skin or gender.
God, okay. I'm
going to play you this other clip, then we'll talk about it.
I have a GI Bill lecture.
That's fine. Here's the clip of him saying that because I figured you would enjoy this especially.
Oh, I'm very excited to hear it.
I would say Christian nationalism, as I define it, that is someone who believes that America was founded as a Christian nation and who wants governments to favor Christianity above other religions. I would say that it is a problem, and I'm very critical of even that version of Christian nationalism in my book. But if that gained the ascendancy, I think in effect it would return America to where we were in the 1950s, minus the racism and minus the sexism. So you might have prayer in public school. You might have Congress declaring America to be a Christian nation. In God we trust gets put on our money. Under God gets put in the pledge. Again, these are things I can make good, prudential, biblical, and other arguments, constitutional arguments against, but it's hardly an existential threat to our country. And that's what people like Sam Perry and Andrew Whitehead go around saying, that Christian nationalism is an existential threat to our constitutional order and to the Christian church. And that's where it just becomes ridiculous, right? It's claiming that something is a big, huge, scary monster, when in fact it's just problematic, in my humble opinion.
So what he's saying is that if we adopted Christian nationalism to go back to the 1950s when everything was awesome, minus the racism and sexism, what would we have in his utopia? If we go back 75 years, we would have prayer in public school, and Congress would say we're a Christian nation, and you would have other things like In God We Trust on our money, which they did, and Under God in the Pledge, which they did in the 50s. And he's like, and what would be the problem with all that, you guys?
Well, in 1950, 10% of homes didn't have electricity, and a third of homes didn't have indoor toilets.
Okay,
but I'm assuming that's not the good.
Jesus. And this guy argues that these academics like Perry and Whitehead define Christian nationalism in a way that makes Christians look really bad, because when they describe it in their papers, they say things like 51.9% of Americans fully or partially embrace this racist, sexist, toxic stew, which they have said, like they've studied this stuff, and they say if you break up the elements of Christian nationalism, a lot of Americans, a majority of Americans buy into at least a part of that. And he's saying, by my definition of let's go back to the 1950s, it's just a handful of, like 25% of Christians agree with my definition. So you guys, there aren't even a lot of Christian nationalists out there, so relax.
So let's talk about the 1950s, shall we?
Yes, please.
Let's please talk
How
about
good would life be if we were in the... I mean, granted, brown people would not be in this country in the 1950s.
Correct.
This was not our time.
When
we
was
were
the
late
Chinese
60s,
Exclusion
70s.
Act? Was that the
That would
end
have
of the
been
19th century? Or 20th century?
I mean, that was the 50s.
Was it?
I'll find out.
Yeah, look it up. Oh boy. Okay.
Oh, you're talking about a totally different thing than I was thinking of.
What were you thinking
1882.
of?
1882.
Oh, I was right. Good job, Jessica.
Good job.
Okay, so the 1950s. What was going on in the 1950s that makes people look back at that as such a prosperous time? More people than before. The suburbs were developing. All of a sudden, people could be homeowners, right? Single family. You come back from the war, you get a nice little nest egg, you get your little house, and then you have your little wife, and you have your little children, and you have your pot in the oven, car in the driveway, or pot in the oven. What is it? Chicken in the pot? Chicken in the oven?
I'm vegetarian.
Oh, God, you're
Don't know how
so
you people make
unhelpful.
your chicken.
But fucking idiot. But what was also going on there is that roughly a third of Americans were in a union, which meant they were protected. They had good wages. They had health care. They had all that stuff. So that was a pretty good thing. I think it is very important. So, like, if we're talking about that kind of thing of, like, we can go back to a time where every family can have their own little house and have their own little patch of paradise, that was true for, like, a third of Americans. Like, do you think New York City in the 1950s was the most amazing place in the entire world? Do you think Chicago in the 1950s was the greatest place in the world? And let's not, like, we're coming down off of these, like, mob bosses who are running everything. It went from, like, the magnates to the mafia to now whatever we have. Things were so bad for so many people. And also, this little imaginary snow globe idea of what the Leave It to Beaver kind of deal was only available to a certain subset of people. And I think that's really important to remember.
They were called the good people, and they had Jesus.
So what happens is that there's the GI Bill. Do you know anything about the GI Bill?
Tell me more.
Basically, it was toward the end of the war, people were realizing all these people are coming home. They need houses, they need places to live, they need jobs. And so we kind of went into action and shifted all of our war stuff into other things. Anyway, all that's to say is these people were coming home and they were given, thanking them for their service to our country. We're going to give you a little package. We're going to take care of you. We're going to make it really affordable for you to buy this house in 1950 or whatever. This was not available to black GIs. And also, because the armies were segregated, a lot of black soldiers didn't see a lot of action. And so they come back afterwards and it was like, oh, you were just like a transport driver? That's not brave. Like you were, because they couldn't participate more fully. And so that was held against them. Also, women couldn't get checking accounts, which I think is pretty...
I will tell you, I have no idea where we're talking about this stuff anymore.
About the 1950s?
Yes.
Me personally or just us in the world?
No, where are we in the story?
Oh, I'm explaining what's going on in the 50s and why the 50s were not a good place for people. Like women who could not get their own checking account or couldn't buy a house without their dad or husband's cosign.
Yep.
Women could be hospitalized, could be institutionalized by their husbands through the 70s for just being like, oh, I don't feel like cooking tonight. And they're like, oh, one lobotomy for you, please. Like anybody who stepped a toe out of line was considered a threat to America. You had fucking McCarthyism all over the place where everybody's pointing fingers at each other. Oh, it was a really not...
So that's what this guy wants to go back to.
Not great.
And his argument is, what if we went back to that time? So he's basically saying, so what if Congress says we're a Christian nation? So what if God and trust is on the money or under God is in the pledge? So
but
what if kids have to pray to Jesus in public school?
That's just the reality that we live in.
And it's very easy to think those things are not a big deal when they represent your religion and you think no one's forced to accept it. But when the children of Muslim or atheist parents have to step out into the hall because they don't want to participate in a Christian prayer, there are consequences for that. When a Christian group says we want to take kids out of public school to be indoctrinated, there is pressure for other kids to join. When you're told by the government that Christianity is the default religion, the implication is if you don't agree with us, you're not a true American. And like you said, this stuff has been happening. Supreme Court has already opened the door to shift resources to private Christian schools. They've overturned abortion rights by citing religion. They've made it harder to access health care because of religion. They're going to overturn marriage equality because of religion. That's what Christian nationalism is getting us now. It's not harmless. It's not symbolic. Like that religion is hurting our country because the most powerful people in the government subscribe to this brand of Christianity that thinks hurting people who are not us is all that matters. And to your point, when the best defense you have of Christian nationalism is that it would turn back the clock 75 years to a time when America was less diverse and everyone who normally had to be in the closet has to stay in the closet because of who they were. And yeah, when civil rights was not codified into law and when women had very few rights, that's a really shitty argument. But it's easy for this dude to be wistful about all that stuff because the nation he wants to go back to always had a seat for him at the table. Sure. He would suffer no consequences under that regime. The rest of us would. That's why it's important for us to name the problem, highlight the consequences, and put a name to it that invokes Christianity to it. That's what Trump is doing. We need more people calling that out, not pathetic fake scholars like a dude who works at a Pat Robertson school downplaying the seriousness of what's happening right now because he doesn't see why it's a big deal. Because again, he lives in a bubble where everyone around him is like, you know what's hard? Being white and Christian.
Well, he wants to go back to a time where domestic abuse was, a private matter that... No,
and by the way, a lot of those things you're talking about, we fixed it to some extent where things got better. Why did it happen? It's because we didn't listen to conservative Christians who wanted to keep things the way they were.
Yeah, it's almost like being progressive is good. Right. And the idea of, everybody was married for a billion years. People are so concerned. It seems to me that these people, these Christian nationalists, are very concerned about appearances and do not really give a shit about almost anything else. Oh boy.
I got one last story for you
Country
here.
is stupid. God do not bless the USA, Lee Greenwood. Got him.
There you go. One last story for you here. This is a follow-up, but I had a follow-up for you that I think you might be interested in. We talked about this dude last October. His name is Zach Radcliffe. He's a 29-year-old guy who graduated from Liberty University. He was a worship director at Oakwood Church in Michigan, just a big church. He's the worship director. He performed music at CPAC, the conservative conference, in 2019 with his guitar because he loves Donald Trump.
Oh, yes.
And the reason we talked about him in October is because he was arrested for sexually abusing kids. And he faced up to 25 years in prison at the time. And actually, when you read the details, it was so much worse. This guy was accused of producing illicit content involving kids, stretching all the way back to 2014. And when that story broke and this guy was arrested, like Liberty University deleted the page touting his CPAC appearance. The church's homepage soon put up a giant, listen, we know why you're visiting our website right now, and we just want you to know we are cooperating with the cops.
Whoa, that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
I bet their servers crashed so many times.
So the church added, to their credit, I guess, question mark, they said, listen, if you have any information about this guy, call the police. Don't call us. Like, that's the least they could do. They said they're cooperating. Whatever. Okay. And what we said is, listen, if you're a child, you would have been better off by a long shot listening to drag queens reading stories at libraries than going to this dude's youth group. But the reason I bring this guy up now is last month marked the beginning of his trial. So they had pre-trial motions. And as the judge who's deciding, do I need to take this to a jury trial or something, as he's hearing preliminary testimony from some of the survivors of this guy's abuse, the number of charges Zach now faces just kept going up and up. So this is U.S. District Court Judge J. Cedric Simpson. He was reading off the charges, and he said he added 9 counts of first-degree criminal sexual conduct and 21 counts of child sexually abusive activity on top of all the things this guy was already charged with. So here's where we're at. This is from a newspaper article. Radcliffe will stand trial on 17 charges of first-degree criminal sexual conduct, 28 counts of child sexually abusive activity, 7 counts of aggravated child sexually abusive activity, and 7 counts of using a computer to commit a crime. That's 59, by the way. If he's convicted, he now faces life in prison.
Using a computer to commit a crime?
I believe that's you took pictures and videos of kids and kept them on your computer. Yeah. Listen, if I'm committing a crime, I'm of course using my computer.
Of course you're going to use your computer.
I'm not robbing a bank these days.
Going to run around with like an axe or something? No.
But that means, like, that's just from the witnesses who testified, who said, no, this guy also did this to me. That wasn't in your charging document to begin with. And the judge is like, oh, I'm just going to write that one down because we need to discuss that too.
Oh, boy.
So there are at least some victims who did not testify or decided they could not testify. So some of the earlier charges were dropped. Very disturbing stuff. One of the victims actually pointed out that this dude paid some of these kids money to produce content for him.
Oh boy.
And this is from the article. One witness testified to Radcliffe using a church credit card to purchase items later given to a different victim. Jesus. And the judge said, sad to say, but I think that's what happened. So that's where the tides were going. So now, whether a jury believes all this, that's a separate story, but that's where this is heading. And this guy now faces life behind bars. And there are pictures of this guy everywhere singing in front of Jerry Falwell Jr., wearing his MAGA hat. Meanwhile, his father, who ran the church that he used to work at, I was watching the sermon he gave
so he's a Nepo baby on top of everything?
Yep. I was watching the sermon his dad gave like a week and a half from now, like before today. And you would think like, hey, maybe you want to say something about your son, maybe? I don't know, talk about that. No, he delivered a sermon that was Islamophobic, sexist, and homophobic. The dad argued that the higher birth rates of Muslim families would soon lead to, quote, every person in our government being Islamic. He also then condemned, quote, dumb women, stupid women, and gay people.
First of all,
My
name is Jessica.
For protesting against Israel's genocide. Because he's like, you think Gaza wants you? No, what the hell are you doing? Like, it's a dumb argument because guess what? A lot of women and gay people and trans people don't have equal rights in the U.S. Right? And they protest that too.
What does this mean?
I don't know.
What does it mean, Hammond?
The reason I saw that sermon, by the way, is not because the church put it on their YouTube page like they do every sermon. They deleted that one from their YouTube page.
Doodle.
I only saw it because people on TikTok got a clip of it and began sharing it.
Wait, I thought TikTok was banned. What's going on?
Oh, no, it's back.
It's back?
Yep. It's just China owned and Trump approved now.
Cool.
Yep. So anyway, just wanted to update you on that. This guy could be heading to prison for life unless I don't know if he can get a pardon. It is a federal crime that he committed.
I have a question.
Yep.
Is it, obviously the stories we covered are almost universally about Christians fucking shit up. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that whenever we hear about these huge charges of child molestation or what have you, trafficking, sex work, whatever, it always is conservatives. Mm-hmm. And is that just me seeing what I want to see?
I'm sure it happens with some liberals as well. It's not a crime limited to one group, but the hypocrisy of the people who think we are better than you ethically because of our faith, Democrats, liberals, they are all trying to do things to elevate demonic stuff. So when they do it, it catches your eye a lot more. It makes for a more interesting headline, but there's no shortage of them. And I wish there was a way to track raw numbers here. Because, again, people send us these stories all the time. We don't cover most of them because it's like, oh, it's just a pastor at a church. Yeah, I've done that one.
Yeah, like how many times can we do that?
Yep. All right, what are we talking about in the bonus?
I went to trivia on Sunday, which was fun. And I've been really into a couple BBC panel shows. Would I Lie to You? And House of Games are the ones I'm into right now. So I can talk about
We will talk about that. Please leave reviews on the iTunes or whatever you use to get your podcasts.
We have merch. Talk about the merch.
We have so many cool designs that are up at friendlyatheistpodcast.com. Just click on the tab for the merch. And you could get whatever you want with a whole bunch of design options. They look awesome. Please go get them. And make sure you go to patreon.com/friendlyatheistpodcast to support this show.
I would read this 1-star review because I do think that's funny. However, the person who wrote it called themselves Turf in the House and describes himself as an apathetic agnostic, an old school liberal, and a proud turf. And so that person does not get their words read on our show.
And also, you think I care about your 1-star review? No, I do not.
No, I don't. I'll only cry if you say something mean about me personally.
All right, we will see you next week.
Yay.